Members of the committee, we are now live.
Welcome, Mayor, Councillor, staff, and those of you watching from home tonight. I'm going to call to order this meeting of our Committee of the Whole Community Development as of now. Excuse me, I'm going to also read the invocation, and those of you who are able to stand, I'd ask you to rise as I read that for you. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness, where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let's not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us, so that we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. We've got Julia Sipple in the clerk's chair tonight, being helped out by Jennifer Page. Julia, would you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Thank you. Councillor Utley.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Here.
Councillor Carpenter.
Here.
Councillor Antosky.
Here.
Councillor Vanderstelt.
Here.
Councillor Van Tilborg.
Present.
Councillor Wall.
Present.
Mayor Davis.
Present.
And Councillor McCreary.
And I am here as well. And let me announce that we are still missing Councillor Weaver, who's off on medical leave, and we all wish him the very best and a speedy recovery. We're also going to be missing Councillor Sless tonight, who's given his regrets. Now, it's my pleasure to read to you the rules of procedure tonight, and I'll read them as they lie before me. All members will be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. Webcams for committee members will be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need arise to answer questions. Any member should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button on the list screen, and clerk staff will lower the hand when we're done. Should we have a service interruption, we'll go 15 minutes and try to maintain quorum, and if not, we're adjourned. We're going to be voting via eScribe, and the clerk will announce the vote results. And members of the public registered as delegates or under the statutory public hearings are able to take part electronically via webcam or via the telephone. Rules for delegations continue to apply. Let me ask members if any of you have a conflict of interest to announce. Councillor Vanderstelt, go ahead, please.
I do, Councillor McCreary. Mr. Chair, thank you very much. The item is one of the last items on the agenda, I believe. Agenda number 8.2, if I have the number right, at 294 Henry Street, which is Lanka Contracting. I have recently worked with Lanka Contracting, and that would propose a conflict of interest for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor. We'll note that, and that'll be separated for that purpose of excluding you from discussion and voting. Now we've got item 7.18, which is automatically separated because we have delegations to that. And we have 8.2, which will be separated for Councillor Vanderstelt's pecuniary interest. Are there any other requests for separation of items? Okay, I see nothing. Councillor Wall, would you please move the resolution to approve all items that we have not separated, and tell me who your seconder is going to be, please?
Yes, could I get that on the screen, please? Easy enough. That all items for consideration and consent 7.1 and 7.2 not separated for discussion be approved. Moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Van Tilborg.
Councillor, thank you very much. I'll ask the clerk to go to the vote.
Thank you. All items subject to the vote are item 7.1.1, 2021 development charges background study draft proposed rates. 7.12, appointment of property standards officers, municipal law enforcement officers and peace officers, building inspectors and municipal heritage inspectors. 7.13, accommodation strategy building disposition update. 7.14, building review task force mandate. 7.15, cost of Aerodale litigation. 7.16, proposed amendments to the delegation of authority bylaw and policy. 7.17, 129 Erie Avenue demolition emergency procurement. 7.19, extension of draft approved plan of subdivision 29T 17505 for 599 Shellard Lane. 7.10, heritage grant program application for 211 Brant Avenue, and all minutes.
And we'll have the vote before us momentarily, folks. Are we having technical difficulties again, Julia?
It's registering everyone's votes except for yourself and Councillor Van Tilburg. Might suggest that you exit out of the app and come back in, but I can take the vocal vote if you'd like.
Yes, my vote will be a yes.
And Councillor Van
vote-
Tilburg?
Also a yes.
Okay, thank you. All items not separated for discussion purposes is carried on a recorded vote of 8-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, McCurry, and Utley. Those against, Councillor Carpenter.
And thank you for that. And I'll remind the public that this is a statutory public hearing night, and that's the night when we confuse the dickens out of people by changing back and forth between chairs. So I'm going to ask the mayor now to assume the chair for the statutory public hearing. You're on mute, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilor McCurry. And we are moving into the statutory public hearings portion. And we do have 2 public hearings on tonight's agenda. And the public hearings are held in accordance with the provisions of the Ontario Planning Act. The purpose of the hearings are to discuss the planning applications, to hear from the public either in support of or against the applications. At the end of each public meeting, the committee will pass recommendations, which are generally considered for final decision at the next meeting of council, which is generally the last Tuesday of each month. The name of anyone who speaks in regards to any item tonight will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of any further proceedings regarding the application should provide their name and address to the clerk's office. The applicant will speak first, followed by municipal staff and then the public. The applicant will then have the opportunity to provide clarification, any questions or issues raised during the meeting. So we'll now consider item 5.1 and 5.1. The title are technical amendments to the City of Brantford zoning bylaw 16090, 2021-259, where the city is actually the applicant. So now ask city staff as the applicant to appear before the committee. And if you please, yes, there you are, Sean. And if you would please present the application on behalf of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee. My name is Sean House. I'm a development planner here with the city, and I'm here tonight to present a city-initiated technical amendment to the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. So to start off, what is a technical amendment? So through the ongoing monitoring and administration of zoning bylaw -16090, the planning department, in cooperation with the building department, identify general housekeeping items and additional provisions to the zoning bylaw that need further clarification and updating. So the purpose of this amendment is to update zoning regulations and definitions, ensure consistency with provincial policy, and address changing trends within the development community and community at large. Next slide, please. So the first aspect of this amendment are those standard housekeeping items that I previously mentioned. We're looking to update terms to reflect current provincial policy, clarify definitions for ease of reference, remove a holding provision where lands have been consolidated, and renumber some zones. So for example, we'd be renumbering the mapping shown on this slide from the M61 zone to the M62 zone. Next slide, please. So the next technical amendment that's being proposed is to introduce a definition for the built form shown on this slide, which is known as a stacked townhouse. We're now seeing more applications for this type of building, and including a definition in our zoning bylaw gives staff a starting point for evaluating these types of proposals. This definition is included in the staff report, but essentially, it looks like a regular townhouse, except each dwelling unit is divided both vertically and horizontally from the other dwelling unit. So, it's a townhouse with one unit stacked on top of the other. And then The big thing about stacked townhouses that would differentiate them from, say, an apartment building is that each dwelling unit has an independent access from outside at grade level. So might look like a townhouse with two front doors, one entrance leading to the upper unit, one to the lower unit. And I'd like to clarify that adding this definition is not going to permit stacked townhouses outright through the city. If a developer were to propose stacked townhouses on a particular property, they would still require a zoning amendment, which is subject to a public process. Next slide, please. The next amendment is to our regulations for mixed use building. So a mixed use building, as shown on this slide, the expositor building, is comprised of a non-residential use on the ground floor with residential units above. So we're looking to clarify the intent of mixed use buildings, which is to, ensure that it is a dwelling unit above and a commercial use below. So we're going to clarify in our definition that residential use does indeed refer to a dwelling unit, that a parking lot or structure does not constitute a principal or commercial use within the C1 zone, and that the parking area shall not form part of the building facade. Next slide, please. The last technical amendment is to the parking requirements for converted dwelling units. So as by way of background, in May 2019, the province introduced Bill 108, which was known as the More Homes, More Choice Act. And this act was intended to encourage the development of additional dwelling units, create more housing. One component of this act was to permit tandem parking spaces for accessory dwelling units. So while we did try to address this in the last technical amendment, however, it didn't capture 3 zones within the city that don't permit accessory dwelling units. And these are the RC, the R2, and the R3 zones, which were originally excluded because they already permit converted dwelling units, which is considered a similar use. So technically, a converted dwelling unit is a building that was originally designed as one dwelling unit, but it's since been altered to create those additional dwelling units. So to further align with provincial policy, this proposed amendment would permit tandem parking for those converted dwelling units as well. Next slide, please. To conclude, the recommended changes address the changing nature of development within the city. These proposed amendments are consistent with Bill 108, the provincial policy statement, and in conformity with the Places to Grow legislation and official plan. Staff recommend that this technical amendment be approved, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. So are there any members of the committee who have any questions for Sean? If you do, please raise your hand electronically. Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Sean, for your work. I just want to clarify, one of the technical amendments, as I'm reading it, is also to update the zoning where we missed some of the zones where we allowed the province's Bill 108 to be enacted. Am I reading that properly?
That's correct, yes.
So we did pass that. So that basically, the province of Ontario has passed Bill 108 some time ago, last May. Oh, no, not last May, 2019 May. And that says that we can actually have triplexes in every part of the city anywhere. Like if you got a garage, you can convert that to a unit. If you got a unit, a single unit home, you can convert that to 2. Am I reading that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, Bill 108, it didn't permit triplexes outright. We have kind of, a triplex actually fits into a little bit of a narrow definition. Right now, a unit on the bottom, unit on top.
Yeah, let me rephrase it. Let me rephrase this: 3 units on a single lot. How's that?
That's correct. So you can do your additional dwelling unit and then a dwelling unit in an accessory building.
So for example, Henderson survey, if someone wants to take one of those straight ranch style homes and convert the basement to an apartment and take the garage that's detached and make that another unit, they can put 3 units there.
That's correct.
There's some qualifications for access and so forth and egress, but That allows those units right across. This finishes it where it allows it in every zone in the city. Would that be correct?
That's correct. These converted dwelling units were already permitted in this, in these zones. And
And is it-
actually, now that you mention it, if we're talking about having a building and having a unit within an accessory building, so like a garage, for example, this would not permit that. So that even though Bill 108 has, permitted that, mandated us to permit it, it's not within the scope of this technical amendment to allow those
So would that become a
accessory
court?
units within a garage or an outbuilding.
Okay, so if it's but if the garage is attached to the unit, is it then, can it then be added or no?
Yeah, that could be converted as long
Okay,
as they're
cool.
providing the parking. Another stipulation, maybe not for converted dwelling units, but for accessory, is that unless a basement, there's no controls for gross floor area. But if it's above ground, it can only be 50% of the main unit. So it can only be 50% of the size.
Get minimum of 50, is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay, so it has to be a fair size. Okay, I got that.
No,
Thank you.
sorry.
And
I might have got that mixed up. Maximum.
maximum 50, so it can be smaller.
Yes.
It can be the size of a garage. Okay, that's why that clarifies that. I appreciate that. Now, this is not, this is a technical amendment because we don't have a choice here. This is something the province has mandated, Ford government has mandated that we do this across the province. And we're just
That's
following.
correct. Bill 108 called for
Yeah.
us to implement
Yeah.
this through our zoning bylaw and official plan.
All right, thank you, Sean, for those clarifications. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilor McCurry, I understand you've got some questions.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you very much. Sean, thanks for the report. So if I understand correctly, when I'm looking at the technical amendments to permit tandem parking in a driveway, are you saying that this municipality has no choice but to do that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that was a direction from Bill 108.
What's the penalty for not doing it?
I may call on my manager, Joe Mito, to assist with that question.
Good evening, Joe Muno, Manager of Development Planning. Through the mayor to Councillor McCurry. I've never experienced personally a municipality not complying with provincial legislation. This is something that all municipalities are going through in Ontario with respect to implementing the regulations and legislations of Bill 108. This was already approved by council previously, Councillor, and what this technical amendment does is just recognizes these units, the residential conversion unit, which would already technically allow it a third unit, but just to allow that tandem parking as per the regulations passed by the province.
So Joe, does that mean now that you may recall a file, which I believe was on Briar Crescent about 3 years ago, where the homeowner proponent wished to borrow about 10 square feet of his garage, and he was prohibited from doing so, and unable to build his dream kitchen because we said that having 5 parking spots in the driveway wasn't enough. He needed the 6th one in the garage. I think you recall that file.
Through the mayor to the councillor, I do recall that file, councillor. I don't believe it was a residential conversion zone. I'd have to go back and provide you some update on that, and that can be done.
That's not necessary, Joe. I just want to be absolutely clear. And perhaps the legal department could provide us with a commentary as well. So this municipality must, to comply with provincial legislation, permit tandem parking in driveways to allow the proliferation of multi-family dwellings in single-family neighborhoods.
Good evening, Kim Jolly, City Solicitor. Yes, Councillor, that's the requirements under the new bill. It is correct. That is correct.
And so Bill 108, that was implemented when? Does anybody know? The year is fine. What year was that?
I'm sorry, I don't have the dates with me at this point.
Joe, do you recall the date?
Through the mayor to Councilor McCreary, I believe it was established in July 2019.
2019. Okay, thank you very much, guys.
Councilor Redley, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to staff. Is there anything in Bill 108 that would prevent the city from designating certain neighborhoods in the city as being unique or future heritage nature, that they can be maintained in their current state?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I don't have that answer offhand. It would be something I'd have to look into, but I can get back to you on that.
Okay, and I think at some point, if there's a little bit of wiggle room there, I'd be willing, and I think others on council be willing to introduce a resolution to designate certain areas of our city as being unique and protect them from I want to use the word ravaging of our neighborhoods, because that's exactly what it is. It's destroying our character of our neighborhoods. And I feel strongly that needs to be protected somehow. But thank you for your answer, Sean. And I didn't think you had an answer today, but if you could do a little checking into that, perhaps if other communities are doing something similar
Just to
as well.
clarify, are you proposing like a heritage conservation district, and whether or not that
Yeah, I think
this zoning?
there's I think we already have heritage districts in the city, but there are some neighborhoods like Henderson as one example. Wyndham Hills may be another. They're very unique in the way they were designed, and I think the people that invested in those homes, they bought them for that reason. It's going to be maintained as unique forever until Bill 108 came along, and that is it's just everything's on the table right now, and I feel very uncomfortable with neighborhoods, some neighborhoods being almost desecrated with
So Councilor Redley, we are in questions. We're not.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was my question. I just elaborated a little bit. Thank you.
Councilor Van Tilburg, you're next.
I know we've gone through this, I think the last time when the council was looking at this. So, but I was going to ask the question again. What exactly is tandem parking?
Through the mayor to the councillor, it's when you basically have one car parked in front of the other. Say you have a driveway that's only a little bit more of a width of a car, so it can only accommodate one car, and then they're kind of stacked in their parking arrangement.
Yeah, so, and how many units, how many apartments could a home be made into and have this kind of parking? Did you say 3?
Yes, 3 units, but the tandem parking, it only applies to 2 spaces. So if they were to have 3 uses, or 3 units and require 3 spaces, then they could have, they'd have it stacked, and then they'd still have their extra one beside it.
If you're blocked, are you not?
There'd have to be an arrangement made beforehand.
Yeah, and I just think this is so idiotic and stupid. It's one thing when a family has to make arrangements. It's absolutely absurd. So if council had said, because I know there were reservations about this before, council had said, we're not going to do this, because I do think we had this discussion last time too. Council said, no, we don't support this, we're not going to do it. What would actually happen at the end of the day?
So through the mayor to the councillor, well, at the end of today, for example, the zoning wouldn't be amended. What those repercussions are from the province, I'll leave it to my manager to speak to.
I think we might have Kim. I don't know, Kim, if this requires us to go in camera or what. You want to get an answer to the question?
Yes, I think that an appropriate fulsome legal response would require us to go in camera to give that opinion. But in briefly speaking, we would be offside the provincial legislation that requires us to do this.
Yeah, I guess, Kim, though, the question, it's now been asked twice, though, what are the repercussions of that? What are the penalties for that?
Yes, and I think to give that answer in a fulsome way, going in camera would be required.
Okay, well, any member of council can do that at any time. Councilor Van Tilburg, any other questions?
No other questions. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Carpenter.
Thank you. And Kim, when we say would be required to go in camera, the phrase is would be advised to go in camera. Requirement is a whole different ballgame. So, but we are mandated to not break law as councillors. In fact, I believe we can't pass anything that is against the law as a council. I think that's already taken care of in legislation. So I think that violating the provincial regulation law would be something that we are not allowed to do as council members. And we've had this discussion before. And the other thing I wanted to heighten that was raised, tandem parking does not mean they can't have parallel parking. Is that correct? Sean?
That's correct. They could still have parallel parking if space permitted.
So we could have 2 rows of tandem parking because we could allow tandem and we would have parallel if there was that many vehicles, right?
Can you just be a bit more specific? So you're talking
we have 4
vehicles on one driveway?
We have 4 vehicles in one double driveway. We could have 2 rows, 2 tandem parking rows.
If that's what was required, if
Right.
they required that many parking spaces, yes.
That would be allowed as well. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks, Sean. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So any other questions? Not seeing any. Can I get a mover and a seconder to get this on the floor? Oh, pardon me, no, sorry. Are there any, at this point of the statutory public hearing, we would have comments from the public. And our procedure since the onset of COVID and moving to virtual hearings is that members of the public register. And we've had no registration requests or requests for members of the public to speak to this. So that then means, since the city is the applicant, the city staff, you have a second opportunity to comment, if only to add to the discussion following following the questions that were asked. So anything further that staff want to add?
Thank you, Mayor Davis. I would just like to add, I mean, we're hearing it full volume. We have undergone or working on discussion papers with our consultant for the new comprehensive zoning bylaw, and this is what we're hearing and what we will bring through the working group and the task force eventually is this notion of parking citywide and loading requirements. So we will investigate this further through through that review.
Okay. Any questions for Joe? Councillor Wall. Councillor Wall.
Thanks, Mayor Davis. You mentioned that nobody had signed up to come as a delegation or to speak to this item, and I mean it's a common thing here at council meetings that we don't get delegations or people speaking up. So I'm just kind of curious, because I mean this is pretty well rounded. This is going to impact a lot of people, and it's going to change our city pretty fundamentally. I'm just curious, like, is there any indication of any input from anybody, even though they didn't come? Any staff, can you comment on like number of emails you've received about this or calls you've received about this? And then from our communication staff, if there's anybody here regarding like monitoring our social media and just kind of public opinion, because this has got to come back at the end of the month to council, right? So I'm wondering if after the headline hits the newspaper on Tuesday or whatever, the end of this week, but what we've voted on here, if there is going to be commentary. But those are my questions. Has anybody indicated that they care about this?
through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. About the converted dwelling units and tandem parking, we received no communication about. We had a couple of folks who were interested in our definition for stacked townhouse. And that's because they were concerned about a property close by where those are proposed, but that's its own separate rezoning process. So yeah, to answer your question, we haven't received any comment about the tandem parking proposed.
Through the mayor to Councillor Wall, I would just add that when we do these citywide technical amendments, our consultation or engagement process includes citywide notice in the Civic News. And through this process, because it is citywide, we also presented the recommendations in the report before you this evening to the Planning Advisory Committee, and they also endorsed the recommendations proposed by Mr. House. And then notice of this meeting this evening also involved another Civic News citywide consultation or notice.
Thanks, guys. Is there anybody here from communications?
I'm here, Counselor. Unfortunately, my video isn't working, but I am here. It's Maria.
Well,
Kawasaki.
hi, Maria. Good to hear your voice.
Hi.
You know how much I love the Let's Talk Brantford thing. Was anything done through the Let's Talk Brantford in regards to this?
Through the chair, I do not believe that we initiated or facilitated a campaign specific to this item on Let's Talk Brantford, but as Joe has already indicated, we did do a number of public communications on this piece, which is typical of the way that we would normally communicate a matter like this one. But we did not do a separate independent campaign on Let's Talk Brantford.
Is it possible before the council meeting to put a post out about it? Is that not enough notice? Because we still have to. Sorry.
Through the chair, it is a little bit tight, but if that is the direction of council, we could get something up quickly prior to the council meeting. We would have to work with staff pretty quickly to do that. Ideally, for a public engagement campaign, we like to have something out in the field for 3 weeks, because it's our experience that that people need to see things a couple of times over time before they actually participate. But if it is the direction of council to do it before the council meeting, we'll do our best to get as much feedback as possible within the 2.5 week period between now and then.
So I understand that it might not necessarily be whatever. How would we make that the standard procedure for these things? You don't have to answer that now, but I would definitely like to see that just be the standard operating procedure for these things. Maybe we can talk about that another time. If you could put something up, anything, even just a post on the city's Facebook page saying that we're talking about this before next council meeting, I would love that, because I would like to see what people have to say.
Through the chair, at minimum, we can absolutely commit to doing some posts on social media to get some commentary back, and we'll see what we can do in terms of something more fulsome on Let's Talk Brantford between now and then.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. All right. So I've got a question, and it's similar to what Councillor Utley asked, and I suspect it'll go to you, Joe. But Councillor Utley was asking I think what he was asking is, are there any provisions in Bill 108 that would allow a municipality to exempt certain areas of its municipality based on some specific criteria?
Through you, Mayor, to yourself. I'm not aware of any specific regulation under this Bill 108 legislation that would allow that. I think that is something that we can speak to our colleagues at the ministry about, and then report back with something to committee or council prior to making your decision at the end of this month. That is something that that staff here at the city can do.
Yeah, I think my reading of the committee tonight is I think they appreciate having that information. And could we also get it may be a legal opinion what the repercussions are if we contravene Bill 108. Is that possible too?
Yes, that's certainly possible. I can prepare a confidential memorandum to go to all of council prior to the council meeting.
Yeah, if you determine that it should be done in that format. So, okay. All right, thanks. Those are my questions. Any other questions? Not seeing any. So I think that then completes the public hearing portion of this particular matter. So I'm now going to close the public hearing. And I'd ask, I believe, Councillor Vanderstel, you've got the motion. If you would please, to get it on the floor, would you please state your seconder if you have one and read the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would love to name a seconder. Unfortunately, I just can't do that right now. Seeking one, and Councillor Wall, I see. That zoning bylaw amendment application number PZ0520 initiated by the Corporation of the City of Brantford to amend the City of Brantford zoning bylaw 169 to be updating the zoning regulations and definitions be approved as outlined in section 9.0 of the report 2021-259, and B, that pursuant to section 34 18.2 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13, the following statement shall be included in the notice of decision. In quotes, regard has been had for all written and oral submissions received from the public before the decision was made in relation to this planning matter, as discussed in sections 8.2 of report 2021-259, end quote. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor Vanderstel. So we're now at the point of discussion. Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Mayor. I get a little bit worried about, although I understand the requests about exemptions, I see us getting into a situation where every neighborhood feels that they should be the exempt neighborhood, and the ones that don't get exempt feel like they're being judged, or there's a different criteria. So I do worry about that. And I do want to make a statement, as things change, and although I know this is just technical amendments, we've already passed this stuff. We, along with just about every municipality in the province, have prioritized affordable housing. And this is the province's way of saying, let's bring the missing middle in. And so, I understand why we might be opposed to this from some of the neighborhoods, but it is a partial solution to our affordable housing. So we have to look at both, and how we accommodate that within our community. I guess we've got to look at, but it's difficult for me to sit here and say, hey, affordable housing is our number one priority, and then just dismiss something that attacks the biggest area for potential for creating some solutions for affordable housing. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. All right, so next, Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I certainly wouldn't even dream about breaking the law in this case, where we don't take provincial directive and live by it according to those standards that are set for us, regardless of what is being passed. But I agree with Councillor Antosky's comments, and to a finer point, when we talk about affordable housing, I want to drive the point home a little closer. We were very fortunate enough to open our home to my father-in-law, who lives with us. Also, two Conestoga College students who still live with us today. They live in our home. We had to make adjustments to how we live, what rooms we live in, where we spend time. This is about, I don't just talk about affordable housing, I demonstrate affordable housing. When you need somewhere to live, you need to find people who are amenable to the changes that are necessary to make that happen. Fortunately enough, we are. And I see this as a means by which people can introduce flexibility into their life. And let me tell you this, change is the new normal. If you're looking for a new normal in Brantford, change is the new normal. This came to us. We didn't talk about it much, but many people are living it today. And I should add that so many of the people who are requiring more space, I think we do in legislative reasoning and passing what we can. I think we have an obligation to students, to the elderly, to make sure that we provide the opportunities, the affordable housing opportunities for people within the structures that we supervise, that we legislate for. So it's, you know, it's an essential part of how we live in community now. I'm happy to live it, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Van Tilburg, you're next.
I've seen granny suites and students living in people's residence and all that such without these changes. These changes are to create homes. It doesn't suggest that they're going to be affordable. That's just an assumption. They may not be affordable. So whether we need to do this or not, there's a mindset that we do, but then there's a mindset also that perhaps we should do it with a little bit of wisdom. And what I'm seeing here is that some wisdom is missing from this proposal. And I also don't think that a one-size-fits-all proposal is necessarily the best. And that is kind of what we've got. So I won't be supporting it. And I'll be looking forward to the legal memo come council.
All right. Councilor Carpenter, you're next.
Yeah, staff in the technical amendment report talked about eliminating the holding provisions where building permits have been given out as well. Could I get a list of those holding provisions that are going to be dealt with in this technical amendment? Not now, but you can, after the meeting, you can send that to me easily. And just for those, I wish we would stop using the word affordable housing. I wish we would really talk about geared income. Affordable housing is, that phrase means 1,050 months. That may be affordable, but what's happening in this province is more homes for more people, more choices, I guess the province is calling it. That's not affordable housing at all. It's not even realistic housing. It's $1,500 to $2,000 a month. If I look in my ward, our ward, Councillor Toski's ward, in the Proctor Collington Drive, Hickory Place neighborhood, beautiful area, Echo Place, we're seeing homes converted to duplexes and driveways widened to allow for 4 and 6 cars. And we're seeing garages added on. And we're seeing those places rented out for $2,000 a month. So let's not confuse what affordable housing really means here. This is more housing for sure, and a lot of people are profiting by it. I get that, and that's the way it goes, and that's what the intent is. So this is, and whether that means that because those individuals move out of maybe a lower income housing to this $2,000 a month rental unit, have a house, have a straight ranch, creates another space that may be more affordable, not affordable. I don't want to use that phrase. We're misusing it, is another matter. But the point is the province has mandated this. They've made it legislation and we must comply. Thank you.
Councilor McCurry.
We must comply, but we needn't stay silent on the issue. I think when you look back on the history of some of the initiatives regarding the creation of housing, be it affordable or not affordable in the province, this was promoted as an initiative to allow senior citizens short on cash to rent out a room to make ends meet, to allow families to make a few extra dollars by having a university student live in the basement. But really what we're seeing in the Ward 3 neighborhood in particular is a proliferation of investment opportunities for largely out-of-town folks who are seeing bargains here and who are buying up particularly corner lots with lots of parking and they're turning single-family neighborhoods into multifamily neighborhoods. And you can take one side or the other of the ideological coin, but I've never heard a next door neighbor say, gee, I'm glad to have had the house next door duplexed, so that folks with no commitment to the community can move in, stay up all hours of the night, playing loud music and racing their cars up and down the streets. I've never heard anybody say that, but I have heard the other side of the coin, and not to cast everybody in the same brush stroke, but that does happen, and people do suffer a lot of trepidation when they see their neighborhood becoming more intense. And I think we really need to have our opinion explained to the province of Ontario. And I think we can start here tonight just by voting this down and demonstrating that, maybe we're not going to take it anymore. And maybe we really need to have a dialogue with the province about how we want our neighborhoods to continue. So that's kind of my 2 cents worth, Mayor. I'm not going to be voting for this tonight, and I look forward to receiving a memo from staff, and perhaps we can create another one of these Made in Brantford initiatives that can go to Queen's Park. We know that now that we have the Doug Ford government in power, they actually do listen, and it's not like the good old days when our letters would go right into the shredding machine. So we've seen before that we've had some impact on the province, and I think this is a case where we should be telling them exactly what we think, and they do listen.
Next, Councillor Antosky, I see you have your hand raised. Before I go to you, I'll ask if there's anyone else that wants to speak the first time. Seeing nobody. You're next, Councillor Antosky.
Thank you, Mayor. I do agree that using the term affordable housing is getting more and more confusing all the time. But I guess the bottom line is you create more stock, you level out the competitive playing field a little bit. There are the issues of people coming out of town for sure. I just think that we have to look at all of these options. We have to balance them all out, and more stock. I think 3% is a vacancy is kind of the comfortable level, and we're well under 1%, and so we have to find ways to do that, and maybe we can look at terminology to be very clear on what each title or phrase means, so that we aren't mixing up the descriptions. Thank you.
Yeah, anyone else? Yeah, I'd say this. I mean, I think it's the greatest challenge that we have in Southern Ontario, that we, for a number of different reasons, have become, if not the first, the second fastest growing area in North America. And that's a combination of the attractiveness of our economy, the quality of life we provide, and immigration policies that our federal government has put in place. It's a combination of all of that. And we're trying to find ways to increase the supply of housing, because that's the core problem of affordability. It's a basic law of supply and demand. If you don't have enough supply, then the pricing of whether it's rent or the cost of houses will go up. And so this is an attempt, we're trying to address that in a way that will increase the supply. But I'm interested in knowing whether or not there is the possibility of implementing some customized local solutions. I quite agree with the comment that in Brantford sometimes we can find unique ways to try and balance all of the competing interests. And so certainly I'm looking forward to the opinion that we're going to receive. But I agree with Councillor Carpenter. If it comes down to that we must comply, that it's the law. I mean, how can we expect people? We expect people to comply with our bylaws. And so if we turn around and when we have a bylaw that applies to us, which is like provincial legislation, we say we're not going to obey it, well, then aren't we encouraging lawlessness? So we got to be mindful of that. But we've got some additional information coming to us before council, both in terms of some public input, also in terms of memos from our legal department and planning, that I think will allow us to make, I'm hoping, a good balanced decision at the council meeting later this month. So I'll vote for tonight on that basis, that the real decision will be made at the end of the month, and we have more information and more info. So any other comment? Seeing none. Let's take the vote.
Item 5.1 is approved on a recorded vote of 5-4. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstel, Martin, and Toski Wall. Those against, Councilors Utley, McCreary, Carpenter, and Van Tilburg.
All right, let's move on then to the second public hearing that we have tonight. It's an application for a zoning bylaw amendment. It's PZ 0621 118-120 in respect to a property on Morel Street. So I'm going to ask the applicant if you would now, if we can have the applicant appear before the committee. And I believe it's a Mr. Dillon that'll be presenting. So if we could bring him in, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Dillon is participating sound only. His video is not working.
Okay. All right, well, Mr. Dillon, if I believe we have you by audio, if you could please state your name and present your application in respect to this application for Morel Street.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor and respected members. My name is Dave Dillon, and I am the owner of 118-120 Morel Street property, currently listed under a zoning bylaw R-4B, and have a convenience store there. This application for the permission of additional use to open a bike store or specialty retail store. This will benefit the surrounding community and other people also, as there is SC Johnson Trails close by. And I think Mr. Stan can explain better points on this application with your permission, because he is renting the this place, if you allow him to speak. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Dillon. So are there any members of the committee who have any questions for Mr. Dillon? Yes, Councilor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dillon, thank you very much for joining us this evening and for bringing this proposal to us on Morel Street. Can you just provide a little bit of background of why a bicycle retail shop, and why Morel Street?
Currently, there is the convenience store there. And when I met Mr. Stan, he having the proposal that he can open the bike store, but there is the close by SC Trails, and people are coming, they can rent the bike and they can go and join, come back. Because this time people took the bike, they tie it with their cars and coming there and taking it back. So he put that proposal right, and that's why you bring the application.
And is the proximity to the Grand River Trails an attraction?
Yeah, yes, sir. That's the main point.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Councilor Carpenter.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, I'll try and be brief. Mr. Dillon, thank you for coming. This is already a commercial property. There's some rental space on it, and there's a convenience store on it, and there's an empty space that you're looking to put the bicycle shop. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
And right beside it on Morel Street is a strip plaza with a number of locations of commercial properties in them. Would that be correct too, sir?
I don't know, sir.
Yeah, so this wouldn't be out of line with what's on that street right now. Actually, in fact, fits with what's on the street.
I have no idea.
Your commercial establishment, sorry, Ms. Dillon, your commercial establishment already exists on the street.
Can you repeat, sir?
Sorry, there already is commercial establishments already on the street, so you're just adding one.
Just we adding one, right, to make it more beneficial.
Yes, I got you. Thank you.
Councilor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for bringing this forward, Mr. Dillon. I really appreciate it. This how long has this this building been vacant before you came up with this plan to change the use?
It was from I think 2 years vacant.
That's right.
Store. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, that's a terrific new use of the space, especially considering the area. It's wonderful news. It's good to see it happen. Thank you very much for bringing this forward.
Thank you, sir.
All right, not seeing any other questions. Hang on, Mr. Dillon, there may be questions when we get to the second part of the hearing, but this is now the part of the hearing where we ask planning staff to make their presentation, answer any questions members of the community have. So I believe we have Alexandra. So you're up next, Alexandra.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Good evening. Planning staff have received an application for the property municipally addressed as 118 to 120 Morel Street. Next slide, please. This is a Planning Act application to amend the zoning bylaw in order to permit a specialty retail store within the existing building. The proposed specialty retail store is a bicycle store and repair shop. Next slide, please. The subject lands are located on the southwest corner of Morel Street and Wilk Street and contain an existing residential and commercial building. The existing 4 dwelling units and commercial attached to a commercial unit were built in 1987. The existing residential units are considered a legal non-conforming use. The commercial unit was previously a convenience store. A mix of residential, industrial, and commercial uses are located within the immediate area surrounding the subject lands. Next slide, please. The applicant has proposed a 160 square meter specialty retail store within the existing building. There will be no construction with the addition of the use, only interior renovations. Under the zoning bylaw, a specialty retail store of this size requires a total of 6 parking spaces. The number of parking spaces on site exceeds the requirement of the zoning bylaw. There's adequate parking on site to support the use. Next slide, please. And this is just illustrating in yellow the actual area to which will be used for the specialty retail store. Next slide, please. And this is illustrating the 6 required parking spaces per the size of the specialty retail store. Next slide, please. In regards to policy, the subject lands are designated neighborhood residential designation in the City of Brantford's new official plan. The neighborhood's residential designation permits a full range of residential dwelling types as well as supporting land uses intended to serve local residents. The proposed use is in conformity with the uses permitted and the policy framework within the neighborhood's residential designation. Next slide, please. The subject lands are zoned residential medium density type B zone in the zoning bylaw 16090. The R4B zone permits a variety of residential uses as well as retail uses, including a neighborhood convenience store and personal service stores. A specialty retail store is proposed to be defined and added as a permitted use through adding an exception to the zone. A specialty retail store is defined under the zoning bylaw as a specialty retail use shall mean a retail store which offers for sale and or rent one merchandise line or a limited number of closely related merchandise lines, such as a bookstore, record store, beer store, liquor store, video store, pet grooming business, or florist shop, but shall not include a major department store, a junior department store, a retail warehouse, or a supermarket. The specialty retail store definition reflects the small scale and specialized nature of this proposal. Planning staff recommend that the specialty retail store at 118 to 120 Morel Street exclude the beer and liquor store uses. This change to the definition would be accomplished through defining the use under the exception. The applicant supports this approach. Next slide, please. The purpose of excluding the liquor and beer store uses is in order to limit high traffic uses which may create additional parking and congestion concerns within the neighborhood, and in planning staff's opinion would not be compatible. The recommended definition will ensure that if the bicycle store was to relocate from the subject lands, a suitable and compatible use would be able to locate within that commercial unit. The addition of the specialty retail store on the subject lands will serve the surrounding neighborhood, and the proposed changes is compatible in staff's opinion. Next slide, please. A public notice was provided by way of 3 signs being posted on site as well as notice of the meeting being mailed to residents and businesses within 120-meter radius of the subject lands. One response was received, and it was received in support of the proposed amendment. Next slide, please. The proposed specialty retail store is considered to be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and will provide an additional retail option that will benefit the community and support active transportation in Brantford. The store can be accommodated within the existing commercial unit through internal renovations, and sufficient parking is available on the subject lands to accommodate the proposed use. Planning staff are recommending that the beer and liquor store uses permitted under the specialty retail store use be excluded through the site-specific exception in order to ensure compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with provincial policy statement and in conformity with the growth plan and the official plan, and provides appropriate use for the existing building. Planning staff is of the opinion that the application to amend zoning bylaw 16090 to permit the specialty retail use as defined by staff is appropriate and represents good planning. Planning staff recommend that application to amend zoning bylaw PZ 0621 affecting the lands located at 118 to 120 Morel Street be approved. Thank you, and I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexandra. So are there any members of the committee that have any questions of staff? Councilor Martin.
Thank you. From the original presentation, I was under the impression the bicycle shop was going into the empty unit. But from the diagram you showed, it looks as though they're taking over the entire commercial area. Which is the case?
Through you, Mayor, to Councilor Martin. The use is approximately 167 square meters, which is the unit to where the commercial use or the old convenience store was located. So it's the same area as the previous.
So it's the convenience store and the empty unit are both becoming the bike shop?
It's only the convenience store, which was the empty unit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Councilor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you. Thanks, Alexandra. So we're going to exclude beer and wine. Are we excluding marijuana as well? Any other fun things?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So under the Cannabis License Act 2018, under section 42.2, zoning bylaws cannot distinguish between the retail of cannabis from other retail. And as per section 42.3, if the city was to distinguish or exclude the cannabis retail under the zoning bylaw, it would be in no effect because it conflicts with the Cannabis Licensing Act.
Are we? Sorry, yeah, that's sufficient. Thanks, Alexandra. I thought that was the answer. Does the same hold true for methadone clinics?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a methadone clinic or a medical clinic are not a permitted use under this zone. I would have to do more research into that, but I don't think it is a permitted use under this zone.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. So not seeing any other members with raised hands, we'll now move to hear from members of the public. And we do have one member of the public who's registered tonight to speak to this. I believe it's Mr. Gorecki. Is he on the line? There you are, Mr. Gorecki. I believe it's of Heron Head Bike. So if you could please identify yourself and provide us with your input, please, into this application.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Stan Gorecki. I live at 51 Devon Street here in beautiful Brantford. I am the future tenant and was asked to come tonight to answer any questions that you might have, although you've covered a lot of ground already.
So I'll go to Councilor Redley. You have a question.
Hello, Stan. It's good to see you again. And I'm pleased that you're the tenant moving into this location. I think it'll be quite a bit more suitable than where you're currently located. So I'm very happy for you. What range of bicycles will you be offering and accessories at the store?
Thank you very much, Councillor Utley. My goal is to basically offer a range of bicycles from $20 to $3,000. I'm fortunate enough to have 3 different companies, Seven Peaks from Quebec, Reed, which is Australian, and then Marin, which is from beautiful Marin County, California. At the same time, we have a selection of vintage bikes, but more importantly, a wide selection of used bikes, which many people, given current economic situation, really appreciate. I've been buying and selling bikes for some time now. And the one thing that I really began to appreciate was the need for, especially for kids, inexpensive bikes. And that's certainly our goal, is to get as many people as we can on the streets on bicycles and out of their cars.
Stan, there's a lot of growth in the Homedale area right now. Was that a factor in this location?
That was a happy coincidence. The main factor was I wanted to be near the trails. The Grand River Loop provides a wonderful hour and a half circular bike ride, which is great for a rental business. And I know many people who are talking about, well, yes, I'd love to ride it, but I don't have a bike. The growth of that area is certainly, like I said at the beginning, a benefit. And as Mayor Davis, I think, pointed out earlier, we're unfortunate to be growing leaps and bounds, not just in Homedale, but throughout the community, which is a big part of why I wanted to get involved in the bicycle industry. I believe that we're going to see, with more 416 and 905ers coming, they're going to bring their involvement with the bicycle community to Brantford, and I think we're really going to see it escalate. And as I look more into it, I'm thrilled to see the amount of work that's been done already to build the bicycle infrastructure. There's lots of work to be done, but there's a great foundation here.
Thank you, Stan. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Next, Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thanks. Good to see you again, Stan. Welcome. So you're going to be selling new and used. You're going to be doing repairs.
Yes.
You're renting bicycles. Do they come with helmets?
Of course.
Do they come with a bit of instruction on how to behave on the trails? Keep to the right and don't act like an idiot?
You're pretty close. I was going to tell them not to be a wanker, but idiot works.
I believe you're okay to say wanker on air.
Okay. Thank you. One of the things that, as a mountain biker, that I've over the years had a real challenge with is bicycle etiquette, and that's certainly something that we're hoping to instill in people. I've worked with the Grand Valley Trails and the bicycling club here to try and bring the communities together. Unfortunately, like so many things, a small number of people can ruin it for a large group. But
now, a number of my senior elderly friends now have to rely upon electric assists on their bicycles. These are very, quite old gentlemen. Are you going to be carrying lines of electrics for folks like that?
No, and I'm not selling bicycle helmets either. And just quickly, I'll tell you, insurance is the main reason. I could find insurance companies that would insure me for selling e-bikes and helmets, but they wouldn't insure me for doing tours and rentals. I found one company that would insure me for doing tours and rentals, but they wouldn't do helmets and e-bikes. You can get a helmet anywhere. So I felt that for me, it was more important to be able to provide the service of the rentals and the tours as well. One of the things that we are doing is something called the Slow Roll. Came out of Detroit in 2011, and it's basically riding a bike ride through a neighborhood. And each week we do a different neighborhood in Brantford. The Slow Roll started in Detroit in 2011 with 2 people, and they now get as many as 2,500 to 3,000 people per ride.
Super. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Councilor Carpenter, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope that the last councilor wasn't referring to your bike being motorized. I think maybe you might have been, but first of all, Stan, congratulations. Great
Thank you.
location. And as you already mentioned, it's right on the trail. I mean, you're 2 blocks off the trail, 3 blocks off the trail there. In fact, if you're taking a shortcut ride on the loop to get back home, if you're living up to Brand Ave or William Street area, you would take that Morale Street, Dufferin Ave route. So what I wanted to ask you was, so you're going to do maintenance. I think I heard you say to Councilor McCurry. So what hours of operation will you be working? Will you be able to be open when people are having riding the bikes, let's say Sundays or holidays or whatever that might be, for them to maybe they get a flat tire, they have need something fixed, or they wanted to get something adjusted? Is that going to be something that could be done right from the trail?
I'll go to the question about hours to begin with. During the week, I open at 1 o'clock, but stay open later until 6 or 7:30 in the evening, so that people are able to come after work when they're going to the trail or coming off the trail. As well, open Saturday and Sunday.
Oh, great.
One of 2 stores that are open on Sundays. And the maintenance issue is a huge issue to me. So I approached the cycling club about repair stations, and they told me that they were talking to the city about repair stations. So I spoke to the city, and we have bought 3 repair stations that will be installed this year. One at the bike park, one at the Gretzky Center, and another one at Harmony Square. I would like to see, and I've told Catherine Broadbelt, I would be happy to fundraise to get 3 more put in next year and 3 the year after. The more of these stations that are out, the more people will be able to, the less excuse people will have not to ride their bike. The stations have pumps and 6 or 7 of the most used tools that people need for bicycling. At our shop, we're trying to figure out how we can also put a pump outside so that when we're not there, people can take advantage of the pump and tools. Cycle Path up on Fairview, they have a repair station outside their store. And I think Stuart's done a great job of leading the way in getting people, having the repair station out. I would like to see them in public places where people are, so they don't have to, find their way to the store.
All right. That's great, Stan. And I know it probably goes without saying, and I think it was missed in what was going to be provided, but the bikes that you're renting will have bells on them, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I knew that went without saying, but.
No, and I thank you for bringing that up. It's you're supposed to have a bell on your bike. You have and car manufacturers put horns in their cars. I don't understand why we're not selling bikes with bells on them. So that's another step that we're doing. Of course, with the supply challenges, it's not easy to get as many bells as I need for all the bikes that are being sold. But for sure, they should all have bells on them.
Okay, I know it's a lot. Thanks, Stan. I really appreciate what you're doing for the community here. This is an addition to that neighborhood, in addition to our trails. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions for Mr. Garecki? Not seeing any. I would know a little bit about the bike market, Stan, and I got to say you've got an interesting niche concept for that bike shop, and I wish you the best, assuming this is approved. So we'll now move back to the applicant, now that we've heard from members of the public. So Mr. Dillon, this is your opportunity to come back and provide us any additional information you think we should have based on some of the comments were made after you made your presentation. You don't have to, but this is your opportunity to kind of wrap it up and make your final presentation to us.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Stan, he already explained everything regarding this project, and I think it's very beneficial for the city of Brampton. At this time, the building is empty and not generating anything, right? So once he will establish the business and it will be okay for everybody, right? So I think that it's good if all the respected councillors should approve it after seeing all the things.
Great. All right, so are there any members of the committee that have any final questions of Mr. Dillon? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Dillon. We'll now close the public hearing portion of this application. And we'll now move into the dealing with the proposal itself. So if I can believe we've got Councillor Utley, I think we've got you set up to move the resolution. If you would please read the resolution, and we have a seconder for that. Councillor Carpenter, I assume you're seconding it. Yeah, okay. So Councillor Utley, if you please read the resolution.
Yeah, can you bring it up on the screen, please?
Through the chair, just give me one moment. I seem to be having a technical difficulty.
I got it. So moved by myself and seconded by
Councillor Carpenter.
someone.
It's Councillor Carpenter.
Councillor Carpenter, thank you. A, that zoning bylaw amendment application PZ0621 submitted by Dave Dillon affecting the lands located at 118-120 Merrill Street to change the zoning to residential medium density type B, exception 27 zone R4B 27, to permit a specialty retail store as an additional use as defined under the proposed exception, be approved in accordance with the applicable provisions outlined in section 8.3 of report 2021-451, and B, that pursuant to sections 34-18.2 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP13, the following statement shall be included in the notice of decision. Regard has been had for all written and oral submissions received from the public before the decision was made in relation to this planning matter, as discussed in section 8.2 of report 2020-451. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Utley. Any discussion on item 5.2? Seeing none, if we could please have the vote taken.
It's not. Sorry, through the mayor, is the vote coming up on your screens?
Yeah, it came up in mine.
I didn't have the vote come up.
It looks like we're having some technical difficulties. We might have to go by show of hand.
Okay, so are there members of the committee that didn't receive it?
Me, I didn't.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, me either.
Well, Julia, could you then proceed on that basis?
Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand and leave it raised until your name called. Councillor McCreary, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Vanderstelt, Councillor Van Tilburg, Councillor Wall, and Mayor Davis. The item carries unanimously on recorded vote.
I'm now pleased to hand the chairing back to Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you very much. We're now going to move on to delegations who are appearing before us tonight. We have Jay Hitchon and we have Andrew Butler, who are appearing as a delegation regarding item 7.1.8, which is non-routine demolition control app for St. Paul Avenue. Gentlemen, I hope you're with us and you can join us now. You're going to have 10 minutes for your presentation, and that's inclusive of questions from this committee. So when you're ready, please proceed.
All right, Mr. Hitchon, I believe you had intended on speaking first.
I am.
Jay, your microphone is muted.
believe we're good to go now. Courtney?
You look good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I trust you can hear me now. Thank you. This is an application for demolition permits for 3 buildings on St. Paul Avenue, being 226, 230, and 232 St. Paul Ave. The staff report recommends the application be denied as being premature. This is called apparently a non-routine application. The only reason that it's so-called non-routine is because it's not going through as part of a site plan process. The applicant has submitted an application now for a preliminary consultation on site plan control. That matter will come before a meeting in the pre-consult format tomorrow afternoon. The proposal that will be commented on by your staff calls for 12 dwelling units to replace the 3 existing dwelling units. The demolition control is a tool enabled by Section 33 of the Planning Act to help prevent the premature loss of housing stock. We submit that this housing stock has already been lost. I'm sure you've reviewed the report. I would ask you to revisit the photographs, and Mr. Butler will provide a further photographs to illustrate the state of repair of these buildings. These buildings will not be repaired. I mean, common sense dictates that these could not be renovated or repaired with any economical possibilities, and so they must be replaced. These buildings do not have not had and do not have any heritage value. That's pointed out in your report. We appeared before the Heritage Committee, and they did not voice any objection to the demolition. It was a no comment situation. Why is the applicant not waiting for site plan approval? He has serious safety concerns. Site plan approval, as we all know, for various reasons, can take 6 months to 2 years. He has nothing to gain by advancing the process of demolition here. In fact, it just means he will spend more money sooner. The 4 main things that staff points out and are under the bylaw, that this control of demolition intends to prevent the premature loss of housing stock. And as I've said, this housing stock is already lost. It is to retain existing residential units. It says existing. These cannot be considered as residential dwelling units. It is to maintain the integrity of the neighborhood. I think we can all agree from a common sense perspective that demolishing these buildings would indeed improve the integrity of the neighborhood. This is not a situation of demolition in an interior looking to let the rest of the neighborhood crumble. The buildings that were once there back in the day have all been removed, save and except for these. Premature loss of municipal assessment. These buildings would probably not add and may well detract from the fair market value of the properties. So we suggest that they're not contrary to those objectives. The issue here is, are they unsafe? Again, I invite you to view the pictures, ask yourself,
if you would want to be walking through there. These buildings are in this state of repair. They haven't been tenanted for 4 years. They were set upon by the previous tenants, quite frankly, when they got eviction notices. There are regular people who break into these buildings and stay there, especially in times of bad weather or cold weather. They constantly remove the coverings that the owner has placed to try to prevent entry. There's been small fires. There is a serious consideration of safety. The utilities are shut off. At least one stairway is not there. There's holes in the roof. Surely you wouldn't want even trespassers to be able to access this building and risk injury or worse. And you certainly wouldn't want your first responders to have to attend and enter into these premises. So we would submit that you should make this decision to allow the demolition, knowing that there is something coming down the line, although it is not as entrenched as staff would like it to do. Otherwise, it leaves it open to serious safety and liability concerns for everyone. So I'm going to ask Mr. Butler to just show you a few more pictures and a brief comment. He is an engineer with Antec Design. Mr. Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Hitchin, Mayor Davis, Council. If you would have, we could have the next slide, please. So I've gone through and put together a couple of pictures of each of the properties. 226 St. Paul is the most southerly on St. Paul. It has significant structural damage from a large hole in the roof that allows elements and perhaps trespassers to enter. The interior is unsafe with the interior finishes being stripped away. Next slide, please. Throughout this particular dwelling, we can see examples of sidewalls which have been boarded up and then the boarding has been removed to allow access to the inside, either by the weather or by trespassers. Next slide, please. 230 St. Paul is the middle house adjacent to the vacant lot. The rear house is open to the elements, and there's notable structural damage to the brickwork at the back of the house. And access is easily gained into the interior of the building. Next slide, please. Here's another view of 230 St. Paul showing some structural damage to the foundations. That if this is allowed to continue, that this would certainly result in the failure of that corner of the house from a structural point of view. Next slide, please. This is a view of 232 St. Paul, which is the most northerly of the three properties. There's a very dilapidated lean-to attached to the house that you can see from the west side of the property. And you can see the decay of the fascia boards and buckling of the roof structure. Next slide, please.
Gentlemen, you have a minute left.
And here we can also see where there's areas where the coverings have been removed. Next slide, please. So the reasons to allow demolition: property owner has begun the process for redevelopment of the property with a pre-consult meeting tomorrow. Houses are beyond repair. Street view is an eyesore, and houses are not structurally sound and pose a risk to public safety and a potential liability risk. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. Councillor Van Tilburg, go ahead. You've got time for a 5-word question and a 5-word answer.
Have you had any property standards issues ordered against those buildings? That you may be aware of?
I'm not aware of any.
Well, they sure look like they could use it. Thank you.
And that's it for time. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys. We're going to be debating your item momentarily. I'm going to ask Councillor Martin to bring the resolution now to put all the separated items before us for consideration. And I believe, if memory serves, that would be 7.1.8, which is before us now. And the item separated by Councillor Vandersteldt for his conflict, which I think would be 8.2. Councillor Martin, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I move, seeking a seconder, that items for consideration consent, that all items for consideration consent 7.1, 7.2, separated for discussion purposes, be approved. And I see Councillor Utley willing to second that. Thank you.
Councillor Utley, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll proceed now with 7.1.8, which is the item for which we just heard delegations. And I see we have Councillor Van Tilburg and Councillor Utley in the queue, and Councillor Martin, and we'll go in that order. Councillor Van Tilburg, you have the floor, sir.
I find this amazing, and I'm assuming that what we need to do is vote this down and then the demolition will proceed. Look, I have properties in our ward that we have to issue orders to get people to knock down the buildings, and that's just not happening because we don't have, I guess, property owners with the financial means and the abilities and the time and the contractors to knock these buildings down. And yet here we have clearly demonstrated from those pictures buildings that need to come down and a future solution for those buildings. Those buildings are not going to be used. They're condemned. And if they were up, I am shocked that there wouldn't have been any property standards orders against it, but all the other safety concerns were certainly mentioned. So I can't but think of anything else other than to agree with the delegates that came forward on that these homes, these houses need to be knocked down. And so I'm fully in support of that. And what I would want to know from staff is that all that is required is for us to vote the recommendation down, and that allows the demolition to go forward. Is that how I interpret this? Or is how it is to be interpreted? Or does something else have to be done in order to allow the demolition to go forward? Any staff member that can answer that? Okay.
Yes, good evening. Alan Waterfield, manager of Long Range Planning, through to the councillor. Yes, if council were to approve the demolition by denying the staff recommendation, then we would be able to sign off our planning department's component of the development, the demolition process.
Okay.
The application would continue on with the building division.
Very good. Thank you, Alan.
Councillor, thank you very much. Councillor Utley, proceed, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I met with the representatives of this property some months ago, and I fully expected these to be demolished in short order. They certainly haven't improved one bit. If they got worse, a lot worse over the past few months. So I'd like to thank Councillor Van Tilburg for suggesting we recommended we vote this down. It's the quickest, easiest way to find a solution here. Let's make it happen. It's a terrible eyesore on that stretch of the street, and it stands out like a pretty sore thumb. I'll leave it at that. No more to be said. The pictures say it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin, you have the floor. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. This is a situation that is only going to get worse. We've had issues in Ward 3 with vacant buildings. We were constantly calling property standards to get the boards reinstalled because vagrants were taking them off, going in, living there, doing their drug deals in there, doing their drugs in the vacant building. And I'm sure that's happening in these houses as well, as we've seen the coverings have been removed. And if we don't get these buildings down before the weather starts to turn colder, you're going to have vagrants in these houses starting fires to keep warm. And next thing you know, we'll have the fire department there risking their lives going into structurally unsound buildings to pull out vagrants who started a fire just to keep warm. So I certainly will be voting against this, and I encourage others to vote against it so that we can get these eyesores removed and remove the attraction for vagrants to go in and make themselves at home. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Carpenter, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Who is the owner of the property? I think Councillor Utley said he knows, but we should know who the owner of the property is. Can anybody answer that?
Member of staff have an answer, please. Staff indicate if they don't have an answer, please.
Chair Patrick Booser, planner of Long Range Planning. When the application was submitted, Mr. Jay Hitchon was indicated as the agent acting on behalf of a Mr. Moyer.
Okay, now what is the zoning for this particular piece of property?
Through Mr. Chair to the councillor, the subject property is zoned residential type 1D, the 9-meter single detached zone.
Okay, so anything larger would require zoning amendment.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Okay, all right. So yeah, so there's nothing. I agree. There's nothing wrong with voting this down and allowing the demolition to go forward. The staff brought it forward because there is policy and procedures in place that says you must apply. And that application, the proponent went ahead with started the demolition process. Even if you look on the map, you'll see that they even had this the sidewalks marked up where the hydro is and so forth. A call before you dig was done, and they were proceeding with demolition, knowing full well that's not the process. So we're here. We are where we are now, and I'll agree. I'll support voting this down. But really, the proponent should have come to us with an application to say, "Look, I want to demolish these, and we could have moved this forward just as quickly in another format than having to have it brought before us." Staff are just following what the policy is, and it's up to us to make the changes. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. Any further speakers to this, folks? Councillor Wall, were you just stretching, or were you putting your hand up? Sorry, I didn't see the yellow one. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Councillor McCurry. You're doing a spectacular job chairing this meeting too. Honestly, the only thing I'm really concerned about at this point right now in this meeting is the eyesore of the site. And I'm genuinely curious that if we do vote this down, when is that site not going to look like that? Because I don't want to support this or not support this at all tonight if it's going to remain like that. So I don't know who I'm asking the question to, but anybody who'd be willing to answer, because for anybody who drives up and down St. Paul frequently, which is probably literally almost anybody who lives or visits our community, that is not a good first impression of Brantford. It's, you know, right on the entryway into our historic district. And you know what I want to support tonight? I want to support that site not looking like that. So how do we get there?
Is that rhetorical?
No, I am genuinely asking. Like, I don't know if we got to amend this thing. I don't know if we have to include an additional clause, but ideally, I mean, I guess if we're defeating it, we wouldn't include a clause. I want that site cleaned up, at least to be appropriate for our property standards. Bare minimum, it should be meeting the property standards.
Good evening, through the chair to the councillor. Planning staff can't speak to the timelines with respect to this application. This is, if you essentially vote this application down, it will allow them to proceed through the demolition process, but you might want to ask the applicants what their timelines are in association with actually taking those buildings down.
Can I ask the applicant, Mr. Chair?
The time for that has passed.
That's fair.
Yep.
Well, if you're listening, I would appreciate, I think this council and this city would appreciate that site getting cleaned up. We're here to work together, and I'm sure you guys want that just as much as, well, I might. I can't speak for the rest of the council.
Councillor Martin, I'm just going to jump in before you go again. Staff have done a good job in preparing this report, and it's an interesting process where the property owner wanted us to be and where they want to be. There's an opportunity to interrupt this process had we in fact, issued property standards orders some time ago, but you can see some deliberate actions here to render these buildings uninhabitable, water damage and holes in the wall, holes in the roof. So it's an interesting summary that you're not really taking living units out of the matrix because they've been rendered unlivable by the actions really of the owner and the inadequacy of the municipality to enforce the building standards on this site. But I do agree that regardless of how we got here, and certainly it's a planned act, and it's really what Ann Westaway used to call demolition by neglect. But nonetheless, taking these things down is the correct thing to do. I'll be interested to see at what point in time something is built on these lands. I suspect before the year's out, there'll be parking, which probably is a use that we could use some of anyway, but I'd be very surprised if that's not the designed outcome in this circumstance. But as others have said, it's the right thing to do to allow this demolition, and I'll certainly be supportive of it tonight. And now, Councillor Martin, another go for you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been suggested that demolition started on these buildings without a permit. Was that the case, or is it just that these buildings have started to be demolished by neglect?
Good evening. Through the chair to the councillor. I don't believe that demolition has occurred on these buildings. It's just that what you're seeing is the decay of those buildings.
Okay, thank you. It's unfortunate that a member of council tried to paint the owner as doing something illegal by starting demolition prior to getting a permit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see no further. Oh, I do see a further request to speak. Councillor Carpenter, you have the floor, sir. Go ahead.
No, first of all, point of order on that attack on my personal integrity. The report said that staff were advised of the process and ignored it. Staff had advised the opponents. So that was what I was referring to in the process. It's in the report if you read the report. Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. As the Prime Minister said, some people experience things differently. Thank you very much for that last comment. Any other? I'm sorry, Councillor. I spoke over you. Go ahead, please.
It just depends who you are.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll go to the vote on this one, folks.
Sorry, through the chair, just to confirm in regards to the process for this. So by virtue of failing this be denied does not automatically give approval for the demolition. So if this does fail, we would need a subsequent motion for an approval put on the floor.
Can I raise a point of process or point of
yes,
order?
go ahead. Go ahead, Councillor.
Julia, would it be, could we amend this to simply say that the application where it says be denied, just says where the non-routine demolition control application for 226, 230, and 232 St. Paul Avenue be approved, period? Would that work if we amended that?
Unfortunately, to swap from a negative to a positive is not germane.
Okay, thank you.
So it's a 2-vote process. Thank you.
Councillor Carpenter, the chair also agrees. We're going to go to the vote.
Through the chair, are the votes showing up on your screens?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
my
No
screen
vote on my one.
shows morale all the time.
Okay, if we can. Sorry, just because of the technical difficulties, we'll just do this vote by hand.
yeah, Julia, we had the prior question still up.
Okay, so it looks like we're having some technical difficulties, so we'll just remove that and we'll just go by hand. All those in favor of the motion before you to deny, please raise your hand and leave your hand raised. All those opposed, please raise your hand until your name is called. Councillor Van Tilburg, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Carpenter, Councillor Davis, and Councillor Wall. The motion fails unanimously on a recorded vote.
So Councillor Vanderstel, are you prepared to introduce the other motion at this point?
I move seeking a seconder that we give approval to demolish these 3 structures.
I believe I saw Councillor Utley waving the loudest. Councillor Vanderstel, anything further you have to offer?
Absolutely not. It's cut and dried.
Any other discussions, folks? Seeing none, Julie, if you could post that and we'll vote on it, please.
Thank you. So the motion will be that the demolition control application be approved. All those in favor, please raise your hand and leave it raised until you hear your name called. Councillor McCreary, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Martin, Councillor Utley, Councillor Van Tilburg, Councillor Wall, Mayor Davis, and Councillor Carpenter. The motion is carried unanimously.
Thank you, folks. Our next item for discussion, separated by necessity to allow Councillor Vanderstel to exclude himself from discussion and voting, is item 8.2. Is there any discussion on that, folks?
Sorry, through the chair, we actually do have 8.1 that's automatically separated as it's a resolution. It's not part of the omnibus motion. It's a motion to waive the rules for Councillor Vanderstel's item.
Sorry, did I misnumber the item for Councillor Vanderstel's? Conflict of interest then?
No, 8.2 is accurate. However, there is an 8.1 resolution that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Vanderstel
sorry.
gave
Okay.
notice of.
Yeah, we have that as well. So we'll, Councillor Vanderstel has returned. So we'll go to 8.1. Councillor Vanderstel, if you'd like to introduce that, please. My apologies for failing to understand the numeric system.
Thank you, Chair McCreary. Julia, if you would be so kind as to pop that bit on the screen. My iPad is acting very silly at the moment, so. Okay, that's section 15, actually, obviously seeking a seconder with this, but that section 15.11.5 of chapter 15 of the City of Brantford's Municipal Code be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without previous notice of motion. I'm seeing a seconder and Mr. Councillor Utley there. Whereas City Council has approved a leave of absence for Councillor Weaver until the end of October 2021. And whereas Councillor Weaver has been appointed as a voting member on a number of advisory committees and task forces, and whereas it would be beneficial for the advisory committees and task forces to maintain the membership of a ward councillor, now therefore be it resolved that Councillor Vanderstel be permitted to sit in place of Councillor Weaver with full voting rights to all advisory committees and task forces which Councillor Weaver is appointed to until such time as he returns, and that B, the necessary bylaws be presented to City Council. As I said, I think I found a seconder in Councillor Utley. Thank you very much. I believe the motion to waive is as clear as a resolution itself. Thank you.
Councillor, thank you. We'll go to the question on the waive.
All those in favor, please raise your hand and leave it raised until your name is called. Councillor Van Tilburg, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Vanderstel, Councillor Utley, Councillor Martin, Councillor Antosky, Councillor Wall, Mayor Davis, and Councillor Carpenter. Carries with the required 2/3.
Well done, Councillor Vanderstel. Your resolution now may be presented. Go ahead, please.
As presented, I don't believe I need to bring any more clarification to it, other than the fact it would be an honor to sit in instead of Councillor Weaver during this period of time. And I look forward to the service. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And we'll note that Councillor Utley continues to be the seconder on this. Councillor Carpenter, you have the floor. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I know the mover said it was clear, but I'd like some clarity on the words "in place." I understand voting member. Councillor Weaver, we all wish him well, but he did sit on some committees as vice chair and some committees as chair. And I just want to make clear that this is just allowing Councillor Vanderstel to sit in his place on the committee, but not necessarily as chair or vice chair, because he wasn't elected by that committee. I just want a clarification on that. That's all.
Staff, could you speak to that, please?
Through the chair, that's accurate. If there would require a new election in that place.
That's all, Councillor.
Yes, that's it. Thank
you very much. Yes. Councillor Utley, go ahead, please.
Just very quickly, Mr. Chair, thank you. It's very honourable of Councillor Vanderstel to support his ward mate like this. And I think we'd all do the same in the same circumstances, but hopefully it's something we don't have to do very often. Thank you.
Well said, Counselor. No other hands are up, so we'll go to the vote on this one as well.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and leave it raised till your name is called. Counselor Van Tilburg, Counselor McCreary, Counselor Vanderstelt, Counselors Utley, Counselor Martin, Counselor Antosky, Counselor Carpenter, Mayor Davis, and Counselor Wall. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Julia. Now, I see that 8.2 comes after 8.1. So Counselor Carpenter, would you please introduce your resolution?
Thank you, Councilor McCurry. It's a move by myself and seconded by Councilor Antosky to motion away the rules that section 15.11.5 of chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without previously notice of motion. Whereas the owner of the property at 294 Henry Street would like to redevelop their lands for a building addition to an existing self-storage unit, and whereas the owner involved attended a pre-consultation meeting today, August 10th, 2021, and city staff and ward councilors with the city councilors and ward councilors, and was informed at the meeting that to facilitate the proposed redevelopment addition, an application for site plan control application and site plan control agreement would be required as the addition is in excess of 10% of the gross floor area and which does not generate a requirement for more than 2 additional parking spaces and or additional loading spaces pursuant to section 1 and 3 of the site plan control bylaw. Whereas the proposed redevelopment exceeds the definition of minor addition or alteration pursuant to section 1 of the site plan control bylaw by 1%. And whereas the proposed addition of building F on the control plan by Blanket Contracting Limited dated February 1st, 2021 is 1% over the required 10% of gross floor area. And now therefore be resolved, City Council direct planning staff, engineering staff to do the following: to exempt the proposed redevelopment from site plan control for the proposed redevelopment addition of building F on the plan dated February 1st, 2021, prepared by Blanket Contracting Limited, affecting the lands located at 294 Henry Street at 11% of the gross floor area of the existing plan. And the reason it's before us tonight to move forward without prior notice is it's to meet the August 24th council meeting timelines, and so that they can proceed with development and have move forward before the winter sets in. And this development's been for us for a long time. It's minor in nature. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor. We'll go to the question now on the waive.
All those in favor of waiving the rules, please raise your hand and leave your hand raised. Counselor Van Tilburg, Counselor McCreary, Counselor Utley, Counselor Martin, Counselor Antosky, Counselor Carpenter, Mayor Davis, Counselor Wall, noting Counselor Vanderstelt's conflict of interest carries with the 2/3 required.
Councillor Carpenter, the floor is yours to bring the motion.
Thank you, sir. And just having spoken, as I said earlier, Councilor Antosky and I were in the development review meeting, and I want to thank Joe Muto and our staff for bringing this forward. We as council had just changed the site plan alteration rules to the 10% timelines or 10% growth floor area, and they would certainly have met that easily by reducing the size of their development had they been aware of that. And but the price of steel is doubling, and they had already ordered the steel and the structure for the particular building, which is something you can't really take back and cut short to make the building smaller. So this is just a minor, and we may come across some more of these in the future with this that are minor, but we're just planning staff is just following the process that they should follow, and this is just a process for council to make this simpler and easier. And of course, this is something the committee that's been restructured just before this on the agenda is looking at doing and making development easier and more responsible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Martin, go ahead, please. You have the floor.
Thank you. The resolution refers to building F, so I assume there's several buildings on this site. My question through to planning is the 11% of building F, or is that 11% of the floor area of all the buildings on the site?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, it is 11% of the existing building F. So building F exists currently, and they are adding to that. The addition is in excess of the 10%, which brings it to 11%, therefore being subject to site plan control, and the applicant owner is seeking exemption for that addition only.
Okay, and since it's 10%, more than 10% of one building of several on the site, I think this is a no-brainer that we approve this, because the addition is less than 10% of the floor area on the site. So if this building had been attached to one other building, this wouldn't even be here as an issue. Thank you.
Counselor, thank you. I see no other requests to speak, so we'll go to the vote on this as well.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and leave it raised until your name is called. Counselor Van Tilburg, Counselor McCreary, Counselor Martin, Counselor Antosky, Counselor Utley, Counselor Wall, Mayor Davis, Counselor Carpenter. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Julia. Now that concludes the resolutions before us. We do have several notices of motion. Mayor Davis, would you like to introduce yours? The title, please.
Happy to do that, Mr. Chair. And the title of the resolution I'm bringing is called Brant Community Healthcare System Redevelopment.
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilor Martin, could you introduce the next two, please?
Certainly. 9.2 Bell Canada damage repair and 9.3 trail safety audit.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. That concludes the business before us tonight, folks. Thank you to committee members and staff, and to those of you watching at home. Wish you a good evening. Keep safe out there.